today we're here to talk about what it is that you can do specifically to accelerate your chances, to improve your chances, and to actually get a board appointment. And we are super lucky today to have from Sydney, David Schwarz with us. He's the group CEO of the Board's Appointment Group, which, for those of you who don't know, is a world's leading board career development firm. And they have worked with thousands of people from a range of skills, experiences, get board experience. And those of you who already know European Women on Boards know that we have been working for quite a few years together, led by our chair, Hedvige, and the board and the team, our CEO, Kristen, to get the European Board Directive passed in the European Union, which has been. So now we're looking at, okay, so what is it that women can do to get themselves ready to fill these positions? And what is it that the overall environment we can do? So with that, I would like to turn it over to David and go ahead and start the discussion. So David, being on boards, getting on boards, thriving on boards is our bailiwick. This is what most of us here have as an ambition. So just to start us off, what would you think is the sort of biggest way to start? Because I know you're a big proponent of this is a process. It's not just a random system and running around finding random spots, applying and trying to get something, but it's a very thoughtful process and you need a lot of clarity. So what would you say was the biggest nugget we need to address when we're starting our journey?
Terrific. Look, thank you for the opportunity to be here and for just the opportunity to contribute to something I'm really passionate about. Seeing males and females gain board appointments or board seats or become non-executive directors or advisory board members or indeed committee members or holding some sort of governance roles is something I'm really passionate about. It's something I've been doing in my background as a past headhunter, executive search consultant, so I've been putting people on boards for over 15 years. And then most recently in my current role as CEO of the Board Appointments Group, it's something I am passionate about. So it's a great privilege for me to be here. So the question that you've asked, which I probably should get around to answering, is about what is the one, how do you start this process? And a lot of people, in my, I think, fairly significant experience, reflect back to me. They said, "Oh, look, I've spoken to my peers who are sitting on boards, and they've told me that it's a journey, and that it's going to take time, and it's going to be really, and you need to be ready for the ups and downs, and it's going to take persistence, and it's going to take longer than you think, and it's harder than you think, and that's all to some degree true." It does take time, it does take persistence. But as you have pointed out, I want to be really clear, I actually don't think this is a journey. I think that's unhelpful language. I think this is actually a very clear process. It's a very clear process that needs to be followed fairly rigorously in order to find board opportunities, unlock those opportunities, and gain an appointment through them. How do you start this whole process? We think this is a three-step process, and it starts very clearly in our mind, defining where you want to be. What organization, what company do you want to be sitting on the board of in 5 or 10 years' time? I think that is the first question you need to ask yourself. It's really important to think about where you want to be, what your board aspirations look like in 5 or 10 years' time. Because if you don't know where you're heading, it's very, very difficult for you to get there. And so the first thing we do with our members and the people we work with is help them define a list of organisations that are going to help them achieve those longer-term board aspirations, so that's longer-term board goals. So working out what that list is today means understanding where it is you want to be in the future. If you are considering a listed board, a thoroughly commercial organisation, then starting in a for-purpose and a charity or a not-for-profit may not be the best first step. There's some science to suggest that the first sort of board role that you are appointed to can be the last sort of board appointment that you gain. So if your aspirations are something thoroughly commercial, then it changes what sort of board role you might take first. If your aspirations are for a charity or not-for-profit organisation, then the not-for-profit place is a great place to begin. But we need to be clear about where it is you're heading in the future, so we can start thinking about which organisations today are going to be both desirable for you and achievable for you. And that's really important. The first thing we do is we start thinking about where your aspiration is going to be, what board role you're looking for in the future, and today, which organisations are both desirable and achievable for you. Because you may want to be the chair of, I'm going to use an Australian business at BHP, a massive mining company, but if you've got no experience in the mining sector or indeed at that level, it's going to be almost impossible for you to get there. And so what we need to do is start ratcheting back your aspirations, those desired roles, to what is going to be achievable for you, but which is also going to help you as a stepping stone to achieve those longer-term board aspirations. So we talk about you're defining a list of target organisations as the very first thing that you should think about. Because people are going to ask you, I may be over answering, so please stop me, but the very first thing people are going to ask you when you tell them you're looking for a board appointment is, well, that's really interesting. What board are you looking for? Which organisation do you want to be on the board of? And you need to have an answer to that, and it needs to be super specific.
Yeah. So you've talked about this before, right, David, this sort of clarity, clarity not just about what it is that the boards are looking for, but also the clarity of, you say desirable, but also achievable. So clarity about what you actually can provide and contribute to a board.
Yeah, so linked very much to what sort of board role is desirable and achievable is, well, what's your value? What's your pitch? You know, if I ask you why, and you will be asked why we should appoint you to this board, or why you are better than another candidate, then you need to have a compelling reason for your appointability. There are now people answer those in compelling ways and in uncompelling ways. What I find most people do is talk about their own motivations. I want to contribute, I want to give back, I want to spend less time on the golf course, my husband wants me out of the house, all sorts of terrible reasons. What we need to do is spin that and start thinking about, what is it that a chair, the ultimate decision maker, wants to see in a successful candidate, and defining a pitch, a profile that addresses their motivations. And there are 5 of them. They are a prior governance experience, having experience working on or with boards, and a skill set that's valuable at board level. The networks and the relationships that are going to add value to the organisation if appointed. Genuine and demonstrable passion for what the organisation does. And finally, it's around cultural fit. You know, a chair is nervous about any new appointment, so they want to make sure that if they appoint you to their board, you're not going to screw things up for them and risk their reputation. So being really clear about what your value is, and massaging that into a board pitch that you can use through your board CV, in a water cooler moment when you're having bumped into a chair of some value, or indeed when they ask you that very first question in an interview, which is, why should we appoint you?
Wonderful. So you said there were 3 steps. So the first is sort of understand and define where you want to go. So once we've done that, what happens next?
Yeah. So once you've got a list of target organisations, so what we like to do is come up with 12. 12 means you can focus on one a month for 12 months. Once you've got that, and that is the base of the kind of triangle, if you will. The second is, well, what's your value at board level? And so you need to be able to answer that. Why you over another candidate? And then you've got to take that pretty much theory and put it into practice. And actually turning it into a board appointment, because until then it doesn't mean anything. Just because you've got a great board CV doesn't mean you're going to get appointed to a board.
Right.
You need to actually understand how board appointments are made. Now, they're only made 4 different ways. So you're only going to get appointed to a board one of 4 different ways. It's either going to be through by responding to an advert, so an advertised opportunity, or secondly, through a recruiting firm who are essentially advertising as well. They may do it by phone, but they are representing a company. The third is by directly approaching an organisation with an offer to help, or lastly, through a personal connection. Each of those 4 different ways require different strategies and tactics and approaches to make success, but they are only going to happen, your appointment is only going to happen one of 4 different ways. I can go into that perhaps a little bit more if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that would be great, and help us understand and what the different key pieces are.
Terrific. So our business does a couple of things. We sorry, I should just backtrack and say we operate in Australia, in the UK, and then internationally. The UK and Australia have advertised board vacancies. So one of the things we do is we source board vacancies, the ones that are advertised, and find them, aggregate them for our members. Now I can tell you that in Australia, maybe 10% of board vacancies are advertised. And so 10% of board appointments are made that way. In the UK, it's closer to 5%, and internationally, and we work hard at this, it is less than 1% of roles that are advertised. I mean, it's far less than 1%. Advertised board, people are appointed via an advertised roles, but statistically, you're unlikely to get appointed that way. Recruiters probably make up another 10% of board opportunities, or filled board opportunities through filled by recruiters. And so, you know, I'm going to be very generous and say 20% at very most, and probably far less, are appointed through a formal application process, through a recruiter or by an advertised opportunity. So statistically, if you're waiting for the right opportunity to pop up in your inbox or stumble across online, or indeed you're waiting for a recruiting firm to call you about an opportunity, you're not, well, you could very well be waiting for a long time. Statistically, it's just not a great use of your time. Approximately, certainly in Australia, about 15% of organisations fill their boards by people approaching them with an offer to help. So there are directors who build their board careers, their board portfolios, by approaching organisations that they desire to be appointed to and think they can be appointed to based on the skills and the experience that they have. Let's say that was 30% all up. 70%, however, of all board appointments that occur, if not far greater internationally, are occurring via personal connections. It's the personal connections that are incredibly valuable. And you know that. I mean, that's why you're here. You understand the power of networks. That is absolutely true in the board appointment space. Now, it's worth on that just thinking about what those personal connections look like. Because as soon as I've told you that that your networks are going to lead to a board appointment, some of you will think about John, Jane, and Jim, who are experienced directors, highly experienced directors, and they are people that you could pick up the phone to or have a conversation with because they sit on other boards and they're going to help you get a board appointment. So a lot of people go to these, what's called strong ties, people that you know well, people that you're confident with, that know you well, that love you. And you think this is what I've got to do. You know, I've got to leverage these people. Others of you will think, I don't know a John, Jane, or Jim. I don't have those connections. I don't have that level of connection. And so, David, is it even worth my time? I just don't know those people. Or vastly, and I suspect 95% of you will feel this way, a bit like me, you'll think, networking, I cocktail parties, business cards. No, like I'm the guy in the corner of the room wishing he was somewhere else. Like it is just too awkward. And you just think, I'm not up for that. Look, and if that's you, bear with me, there is a solution here. But in all of those cases, whether you love networking, you hate networking, whether you know John, Jim, or Jane, or you don't, those strong ties that you know well are actually the least powerful group of individuals to get you a board appointment. So there was a study done by Malcolm Gladwell, there was a study quoted by Malcolm Gladwell, who some of you may know, wrote a book called Tipping Point. And in this book, he quotes a study from a guy called Mark Granovetter. Now, it's a classic study, which just means it's old. And Mark Granovetter wrote this classic study called How to Get a Job. And in it, he interviewed 406 Boston executives, and he asked them how they found their most recent executive appointment. He found that 56% of those people were appointed to a board via a personal connection. So it kind of mirrors the 60-70% of people that were appointed to a board via a personal connection in my study. So 56% of these people were appointed to an executive role, their last executive role via a personal connection. What Mark Granovetter did then is asked a very clever question. He said, well, how often did you see that person that gained you that executive appointment, that executive role? An overwhelming 83% of that 56%, so 40% overall of people were appointed to that executive role via somebody that they saw rarely or infrequently. These people they called weak ties. So it wasn't the John, Jims, and Janes of this world that were the most valuable. It was the people that you rarely meet. You meet once a year at that conference. You meet in this environment. You are all weak ties now. And better still, you can generate weak ties. Right. So it's through those weak tie connections that 50% of all board appointments are occurring. And so if you're spending all of your time writing board applications, waiting for a recruiter to call you, then statistically, you're not really waiting. You're not really, it's not really a great use of your time. You need to start thinking about how to develop the right relationships around your target organizations, utilizing your pitch so that you can start being proactive about this board appointment process rather than being reactive.
You, David, in your experience, have you seen a difference between genders? Like, do women spend more time doing one type of activities versus men? Or do you like my sense is, just listen to you and seeing other research, that women tend to do the homeworky part, get our materials ready, get our analysis ready, and less in the networking. But is that true? Is that true? And do you see differences between men and women?
Yeah, I've actually written I've written an article on this. Let me just, you know what? I won't be able to find it in time. I've written an article about
send it to us and we can circulate it.
I've written an article about why women don't apply for jobs but should. And so I think there is, in my anecdotal experience, a tendency for women not to enjoy that networking element as much, not to be so forthright. I feel like they say often they don't want to be seen as pushy and things of that nature. So yes, perhaps women struggle with that a little bit more, but frankly, not many people enjoy networking. It's not a sweet spot for the vast majority of people. And frankly, it's a bit it's about 2000. It's a little 2000, and when was pre-COVID? 2017 or 2020 probably. Networking events with cocktail parties and business cards are not the way people network anymore, or actually, as I prefer to call it, develop personal connections.
Yeah.
Those networking events are only as good as A, the people that turn up, and B, the people that you speak with.
Yeah.
None of which necessarily are going to be around your target organizations. So it could be the greatest group in the world that turn up to these networking events, but who do you speak with? Do you have anything to say to them? And can they help you gain the sort of board appointment that you can actually get appointed to? Very rarely is that the case. In the age of LinkedIn in particular, it's how we do most of our work. It is a terrific opportunity to connect with people. And if you get your targets right, if you approach organizations that you both want and can be appointed to, that you're passionate about, and you can articulate your value to, then you can start approaching those current and those past directors really genuinely, really authentically, to start relationships. And so it's not about cocktail parties and business cards. And what's the worst can happen? I mean, pretty much the worst is going to be they don't respond to your lovely note to them.
Right.
That's not too difficult to swallow.
Right. So David, you and I have talked about this board readiness program that that European Women on Boards has. And one of the questions that has come up in when we talk about networking is when I meet somebody new. So, what you were saying, your weak ties, the people that I've kind of met at a conference or I was introduced through a connection. I'm not sure how to get into this issue of expressing who I am and what I'm interested in, because I tend to, the comment was, I tend to sort of really focus on a social connection and understanding that. How do I transition from getting a human connection to, and here's what I'm interested in, and here's what I'm looking at, and I don't know if there's an easy answer, but have you seen some best practices?
Yeah. So there's something called the what is it? I can't remember the clever phrase. Anyway, so here's the challenge. People, you, me, everyone, are unable to hold differing views of one person at the same time, which is really a long way of me saying that you're going to get pegged. You're going to get pegged as a mum, in this context, a mum, an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, the soccer mum, the sister, the wife. You're going to get pegged one way. And so your job in networking, personal connection sort of environments, or indeed on LinkedIn, is to help people understand in this context that you're looking for a board appointment. It is perhaps the most important thing that you can do to gain a board role. I mean, if you're going to write down anything from today, I want you to write down, tell people that you're looking for a board appointment. It is often the most valuable thing that you can do. And anecdotally, in my world, we've had, I can think of a woman in particular who took that advice on and started telling her friends and people that she would meet that she's looking for a board appointment, in addition to being a doctor or a lawyer or whatever else she would do. And her friends would come to her on 2 different occasions and said, "Oh, really? I didn't know. You should have told me earlier. There's a number of people I could have introduced you to, or indeed organizations looking for a board member." Just telling people is the most valuable thing that you can do beyond anything else. So I think that's a great way to begin. And that way people start pegging you and they start thinking of you in that context, because they may just think you're too busy, you're not interested, you don't have the skills, there's a whole range of reasons that people will look past you. But if you tell them you're looking for a board appointment, it can often be the most valuable thing you can do.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because earlier on in the conversation, you were saying that the discussion is not about necessarily this next step, but it's about where you want to be in 5 years, or in, where's that ideal? Or as they say in hockey, right? You don't run to where the ball is, you run to where the ball is going to be. And so that sounds pretty similar here as well. that we tend to look for what's the next available thing and grab what's coming rather than, you know, so which for most of us means putting our jobs ahead of our careers, right? So our focus is on getting this work done today rather than what do I need to do to get the job tomorrow. So that's a really interesting approach in trying to keep thinking out there. Do you find
it's a very organic process? You just need to start working this into your vernacular, that you're looking for a board appointment, and you need to be ready for the subsequent question, which is going to be, "Oh, that's really interesting, Renee. What board are you looking for? Which organisation do you want to be on the board of?" And that's when you need to have that first step in place, a list of organisations. Because if you go, "Oh, any board will be fine," well, then you lose all credibility, don't you? You need to be super specific, because that super specificness gives people confidence that you've thought this through, and it's a great way to begin.
Right. So we have about 5 more minutes before we go to questions. So David, are there, you know, we've talked a lot about networks. So if you actually want to get exposure and, as you say, increase not just your strong ties, but your weak ties, that means you really have to focus on also diversifying the types of people that you know, and the types of networks that you have access to, the people that know you, that you know. Are there any tips you can give us, and how do we go about going and finding new areas of involvement, of knowledge, of getting to know people?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to spin your question up just a little bit, so you'll forgive me.
Okay.
Let me give you a little bit of I think this is exciting. This is exciting in my world anyway, okay? And I think it's going to answer your question. So rather than kind of getting in, look, yes, you can build up your experience by getting committee work within your executive careers, and you can volunteer time in you know, the local school boards and what have you. I think that's somewhat useful. But I think we can short-circuit this process by taking it a little bit differently and just using what I've done. So look, this is the approach we take, and you're just going to have to bear with me if it's a bit small. But this, I think, is the best way to gain a board appointment. If there is a silver bullet for gaining a board appointment, I think this is as close to it as possible. I mean, there isn't one, but if there was, this is pretty close. So what I recommend you do is go back to step 1. Name which is the organisation that you both think you want and can be appointed to. What are you passionate about? What is that organisation that floats your boat, that you know that if I got you in front of one of the board members of, you can have a great conversation about them and about what you can contribute. Okay, so pick that organisation. For today, let's just say it's the Red Cross. Okay, so when I say Red Cross, you say company X. Red Cross goes in the middle of a piece of paper. Then what you do is via the website, you find out who the chair and the current board members are. Okay, you can do that via the website most of the time, could be LinkedIn, and you list them on top, and you put a big red line underneath them and say, these are the people I need to impress in order to get a board appointment. These are the people that I know that if I got you in front of right now, you'd have a so-so conversation, but it wouldn't be amazing. So what we do is we say, put a big red line under them, say we're getting to them, but not quite yet. Instead, what I want you to do is, for the Red Cross, is you want to find who the past non-executive directors are of the Red Cross. You can do that. There's a number of different tools that will allow you to do that. LinkedIn, if you've got the time and the inclination, will allow you to do that. But you want to find out who the past non-executive directors are. And then you want to also think about who the past executives are of the Red Cross, and then who the competitor, or in this case, who the similar organisations are to the Red Cross, who the stakeholder organisations are of the Red Cross, and who the client organisations are of the Red Cross. And then who the current and the past board members are of those competitor, stakeholder, and client organisations. If you do this, then there is easily 30 people, past board members, past executives, current and past board members of their stakeholder, client, and competitor or similar organisations that you can find. 30 minimum. You could easily blow this out to 50 for this one organisation. And then what you want to do, because you're passionate about the Red Cross, because you know something about them, because you've been in this world, because you know you both can and want to be appointed to them, you can then start having really authentic conversations with these people. You can start reaching out to them really easily via LinkedIn, primarily, perhaps through a personal connection who can introduce you to one of these people. And because these are an organisation you're passionate about, these are people that you can have an authentic relationship with. You can start developing conversations with. And these are, of course, what are they? They're not your strong ties, they're weak ties. Now, 50% of all board appointments are occurring through these sorts of connections. And they are authentic ones. You're not turning up to these people saying, hi, give me a job. You're talking about the Red Cross, something that you're probably already linked with, known by, interested in, passionate about. And so you have these conversations, you develop these relationships, and then you take all of that knowledge, you pull it together, and you start approaching the current board members. Because at this point, you can then reference having conversations with these people about the insights you've gained, the knowledge of the organisation. You've shown yourself to be proactive, intelligent, engaged, informed, articulate. You understand the acronyms and the language which only these people know. You've shown that you have those board level connections. They are all the qualities that the current board want. And of course, yeah, so that makes you a better candidate for the Red Cross. Absolutely, 100%, 10 times over and 100 times over. Partly because nobody else does it. Nobody else takes this approach. So what we're trying to do is separate yourself from your competitors. And this is a great way to do it.
Right.
One more thing though, and this is where I think where it gets super exciting. Across the board, 50% of organisations that have boards recruit new board members every single year. Now these people, they're all board members currently or in the past. They sit on 1, 2, 3, half a dozen other boards currently in the past who are recruiting board members 50% of the time. By connecting with these people, these weak ties, you are getting access to those other opportunities. So if you're waiting for the right advert to come up, you're waiting for the recruiter to call you, you're not wasting your time, but it's a slog. Right. Somebody mentioned earlier about how do you keep the momentum up? Yeah, it's hard. Bloody recruiters, bloody adverts. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be thinking about how to be proactive. And by connecting with these people who are working in spaces you're already passionate about at board level, that's when you're starting to access opportunities that, frankly, others can't find. You will be able to find, and because it's just you and them having a conversation, you're much more likely to be appointed to because there are no other competitors to compare you with.
Right. This is great. So target, know who you're targeting, be clear on your aspirations, figure out how to get appointed, how those boards get appointed. And I really like this sort of very segmented, focused, and meaningful networking. So thank you so much. This is really great advice. We'd like to open it up. We have Andrea and do I see? Well, we'll start with Andrea, but there should be, there she is. Hi, Patricia. Some questions from the audience. Andrea, do you have some questions you can ask us? Yeah.
Sure. Jessica asked about, every board has a bit of specific needs. So are there some universal board member qualities? We need to figure out the specifics, right?
Yeah.
What would be universal?
Okay. So I think you're talking about the executive skills. I think that's what you're talking about because I'm going to assume that's the case. If it's not, you'll correct me. Look, so people think, 50% in my experience of boards are made up of individuals with finance, audit and risk, and legal experience, which is probably what many of you think. And in the past, that was a higher percentage, but and so they are still desirable skills. There's still lots of people with those skills. So that doesn't mean just because you're a lawyer, you can get a board appointment. It's more complex than that. And then the other 50% are made up of people with different skill sets, different levels of experience. HR in a post-COVID world, incredibly valuable. IT, post-COVID world, incredibly valuable. IT transformational change within a business, incredibly valuable. Marketing, much more valuable than it's ever been before. And there's always this industry experience element as well, particular insights in particular industries. So they are the skills. I talked about earlier there being 5 key elements to a board that a chair was wanting to see in a successful candidate: prior governance experience, those executive skills, the networks and relationships, passion, and a cultural fit. People think it's in that order. You've got to be a board member to be a board member, and you need to be a lawyer or an accountant to sit on a board. I want you to think about it in the opposite way. If you are not a good cultural fit and the chair thinks you're a risk, if you are not passionate about what the organisation does or indeed your contribution to it, and if you're not going to deliver the networks and the relationships that are going to help them grow, for most chairs, if you don't have those 3 things, it's a non-starter. It doesn't matter how good you are or how much board experience you've got, they're not going to even consider you for a board appointment unless you've got those first 3 things.
Wonderful. Patricia, do you?
Yeah, maybe a practical question, David, and I'm going to combine 2 questions here. So Maria is asking, do I need a specific net CV? And then Federica asks, if you are writing on your LinkedIn profile, is it a good idea to write that you're looking for board appointments, and is there an elegant way to do so?
Yes, and yes. So a board CV is very different from an executive CV. So we talked about that second element, which was about your pitch, and you need to have a verbal pitch, and you need to answer a question said, why should we appoint you? But you need some documents that support that as well, and a board CV does that. It is different from an executive CV, and it's just as valuable writing that. The process of writing your board CV can be as valuable as the end product, helping to articulate what your value is at board level. And so you need a board CV. I have reviewed more than 10,000 board applications of board CVs. I've written myself more than 5,000 board CVs. I'm one of those strange people who enjoy writing CVs. And it is different. You need to have a very clear pitch at the top of it. You need to have a very clear understanding of what the experience that you've gained to date means for a board. So why are your skills valuable at board level as opposed to as an executive? Your CV needs to articulate that, because you're applying for a different job. You wouldn't be putting in a CV for a plumbing job for an electrician's job. You need to have a document that addresses that. Critically important, and it shows intent as well. If I've got to choose between 2 candidates, one has a board CV and one doesn't, then I'm going to go with the person that has spent time and effort, maybe some money, writing a board CV, because it shows that they're a little bit more proactive, a little bit more serious about this than somebody who doesn't. So, and this whole process is about layers of value. I don't know what's going to get you appointed to a board, so you've got to do everything, and a board CV is part of that. Link to that is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is neither executive nor non-executive focused, and so you need to find some language. And when we update the LinkedIn profiles for our members, we find some common language that addresses your board aspirations, but also your executive aspirations, and which are probably currently paying the which currently pay the bills. And so, so you need to find something that does both, because what's going to happen is when your application goes in, or when they're considering you for a board appointment, they're going to be looking at your LinkedIn along with your CV, and they need to see synergies between the 2.
Can I sort of interrupt here? Also, David, one of the things that we found, again, in EWOB's board readiness program is this idea of just going through the process of, which you have said is a first step of saying, okay, here's my executive experience, and now I've got to translate it into how does this make a difference to a board, or which kind of a board would need these skills. That just from a thinking process and analysis process prepares you very well then to understand how you exist in context in the new universe. So outside of just having the materials ready, it's a very, very important and key role in then guiding your search along. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I couldn't agree more. As I said, this thinking process is almost as valuable as the end product, because if you got to the end product without the thinking, you'd screw it up when you got there. Excuse my Australianisms.
Andrea, do we have other questions in the chat?
Yeah, we do. So Henrique was asking, when you were talking about industry specific, does it have to be like mining industry, or can it be business in transformation?
Can it be, sorry, again, please?
So does it need to be like a mining industry, automotive, or can it be, you're looking for companies that are going through transformation, right? You want to focus on the transformation part.
Yeah, okay. Again, if I've understood the question correctly, so the organization that's most likely to appoint you is one that you either know already or are known by. And so your industry, so you need to think about your industry specialism and which organization is going to value that experience. Because if you've worked in...
Let me try to rephrase, David, sorry.
Oh,
so
okay.
Let's say I'm going to put on my case what was asked, right? I work in finance, but I focus on finance software transformation, right? That's transferable skills. So could I look for positions that, companies that are going through digital transformation versus companies in mining?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I was thinking about yes, you can. So you need to think about. So there's a whole process that we go through that unpacks people's backgrounds and experience. And so what you need to do is think about. Because I just come from this from an appointment perspective. Which organisations are going to value what you've done? And some of them will be in the industry you work in, or some of them will have, for example, if you work in a highly regulated industry, then what other highly regulated industries will value that? And so if you're in technology, then which organisation is going to value that sort of experience you've got? But you're still going to come back as close as possible to the industries you've worked in, because remember, this is going to be a competitive process. And so whilst you could add value to a mining company, if you've never worked there and other people have and have similar experience, then you're going to suffer in comparison.
Okay, yeah. Patricia? You're on mute, we don't.
Excuse me, I thought I pushed the unmute button. My apologies. A practical question again. What is the best way to find past executive directors or non-executive directors of a company?
Yeah, there are various tools. LinkedIn will do it if you have the time. If you go to the look, honestly, I have a team of people who just do this. So it's not a super simple exercise. Well, it is a super simple exercise. It's just a laborious one. So we use a number of different web applications that help us to do that. If you get, there are various paid for services where you can which list who the board members were currently in the past. But look, for this purpose of this exercise and for the amount of effort that you're probably willing to go to on your own, under your own steam, LinkedIn is the best way to do that. You can search on past members for an organisation and you can just scroll through that and find these people fairly easily. Old annual reports, absolutely. There's a whole range of different ways you can do this.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions before we will ask everybody just to fill out a quick, brief survey. So I think, is it Andrea?
Yeah.
Do you?
I'll go. Sashka asked, picking on what you said at the start about desirable and achievable. How would you evaluate achievable?
Yeah, again, not a super simple question for me to answer in the moments of it you have left. I think I just want to come back to, well, which organisations have you worked with currently or in the past? Which organisations are you passionate about? And then you look at them and you say, well, are these currently, are any of those targets in their own right? If they are, if they're achievable, if you feel like they're achievable, you can look at the other board members or the current board members and say, do you stack up against those people? Then they're achievable and you should go ahead and start approaching them. If they're not, then you say, well, okay, company X is above my pay grade currently. Well, who are their competitors? Who are their stakeholders? Who are their clients? Who are the second tier organisations? And so that can be a great way to think about what might be achievable.
Absolutely. Patricia?
Yeah, let me again combine two questions into one. Questions from Mary and Sylvia, both a little bit the same. What can I do if you have a scientific background to gain experience in some of the other areas like governance? And then Sylvia asks, what if you want to distance yourself from your prior industry? So this is a bit of if you maybe need to gain some skills or maybe make some changes because you want to go in a different direction. Thank you.
Yeah. So some of this is it's just a bit of tough love. Look, if you've been working in the scientific area for a long time, and that's where your skills and your experience and your relationships lie, then it's most likely that is where you're going to gain certainly your first board appointment, and may even be where you spend your board career. And I think that's a great thing. I mean, I work with the number of people I speak to who want a board appointment and can't find one. If you can find one in the industry that you're already in, then that's a great thing. I wouldn't want to change that. One of the questions people ask me is, well, how do I step it up from a not-for-profit or a charity to a paid or a commercial role? How do I make that change? And I want to come back to this process. This is it. You need to develop these relationships. And so even if you're trying to get out of a scientific world into a different industry, it's these relationships that are going to help you to do that. It's these relationships, because the people that sit on these boards are sitting on other boards. And if you can impress them, if you can develop a relationship with them, then you're much more able to leverage those relationships into your appointments. It's not a simple process. It's a simple process, but it's not necessarily a quick one, but it's far more enjoyable than writing application after application after application for a role that you really feel like you should get, but it's in a different industry and somebody else is getting because they have more industry experience than you.
Great. All right. Well, if there's no other pressing, Andrea, you have one more?
I'd like to have one because I got some direct chats for that question. So
okay,
if we can ask that one.
absolutely.
So Angela asked about a systemic problem in German culture, at least. If you say that you're looking for a non-executive director position and after 1 year you still don't have one, you are just considered out of the game, a loser, and your chances get significantly reduced. Any idea how to address that?
Look, I cannot speak for the German context, but I know that persistence is key, and it's an attractive quality, an attractive trait in directors. People who give up, then they're not going to get a board appointment. they're not going to get anything, right? But in this space, you know, persistence and consistency is key. The way you, and you're not, yeah, and telling people you're looking for a board appointment, well, again, it is not, in my world at least, there's no shame in that. And if it takes 12 months, then, well, and this might be a good way for me to finish. You know, there's only 3 reasons that you're not going to get a board appointment. You're either trying to target the wrong organisations that are that don't match your aspirations and the reality. Your pitch to those organisations isn't strong enough, isn't compelling, or 4, you're not doing the right things, or indeed you're doing the same things over and over again that aren't working, or you're just waiting for something to happen magically. And so you're not doing the right things. If, however, you're targeting the right organisations, you've got a really strong pitch to them, and you're willing to do this sort of approach, then a board appointment within 12 months is what we work with our members to do. That is our firm expectation, of board appointment within 12 months, and our aspiration is for something far quicker.
Yeah, and that is the exact key message, right? This is not about magical thinking or wishing it. This is really about being disciplined, being clear, and persistent. Thank you, David, so much. David, again, is the CEO of the Board Appointments Group. He's going to stay with us for another half hour for all European EWOB members who are pre-registered to do a networking event with him. What we do ask you is please stay on the line. 1 minute we need for you to do in fact, we could probably put the questionnaire up there. You know, at EWOB, we're trying to create these networks across Europe of women who really stand up for each other, help each other, make each other more visible, support each other. So it's really important that you give us your feedback and fill out your form. Let us know how this event was for you. And David, thank you so much, not just for your generosity of just your thoughts and your process, but you have always been so open to sharing with us and trying to really help move people on to success. So we are going to call you also for the board readiness program and some of the other programs at EWOB. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have a male ally with us.
You're more than welcome. It's been a privilege.
So again, please fill out your forms. If you are an EWOB member, please do stay on. We ask that you keep your cameras on for the networking piece. If you're not an EWOB member, come join us. We're a nice group of women, and we have a lot of fun.